Hello there, this is Beth Waller here at Team Waller's Open House, and I am so excited. Our first Facebook Live interview here. We are at the Woman Gathering, sponsored by the Front Royal Women's Resource Center, and I'm here with some wonderful ladies, especially this one here. Eka Kapiotis is going to interview Rosalie Norem. We're going to have a meditation first, followed by an interview, so please join us. And remember about this space. This is Team Waller's Open House right here on Main Street. It's free for community events like this, and I'm so thrilled that the Women's Resource Center has embraced this space. You can hear a lovely longer talk by Rosalie next Wednesday at the Women Networking Luncheon. Don't have to be in business. I guess you don't really have to be a woman, but there are mostly women here that come and have lunch. You can bring your own lunch, grab lunch at the Daily Grind, and hear wonderful speakers. And I'm so looking forward to this preview for what we're going to hear about on Wednesday. So carry on. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Beth. We really appreciate you offering this space to us. And we're really excited to be here tonight. As Beth was saying, this is our launch of Facebook Live interviews. We'll be doing this on the third Thursday evening. This is also open to have anyone come and join us. You can please join us for that. It starts at 5:30 and will end at 7:30. Although the actual interview we plan to start at 6:15 and will run for about half an hour. I'm very thrilled to have Rosalie Norem here today. We met a number of years ago when she gave a talk, a presentation for the Women's Resource Center at 7:30 in the morning. When we used to do our
No, actually, that was the Rotary Club. I don't think ours is quite that early.
Quite that early? Okay. And I was so impressed, so I'm really thrilled to have you back again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, it was requested that we do a little meditation before we start our interview, and I think that that's a really great idea, because this whole idea of woman gathering, I don't know about every woman here or watching, but as women we tend to jump on our horse and ride off in all directions. So I think not only do we want to gather as women in our physical bodies, but also I'm going to invite you to gather yourself back. Give yourself a minute to just focus on yourself. So I'd like to invite you to, if it's comfortable for you, if you're not driving or something, which hopefully you're not, to allow yourself to just settle into your chair and just release any expectations that you might have of yourself right now. Let yourself just let go. And if your mind is running off in all directions, just allow yourself to notice that and then come back into this moment. And how it's very helpful for people sometimes to notice their breathing. So I'm going to invite you to notice that as you breathe, you can feel the air coming into through your nostrils and going down the back of your throat, and it feels a little cool. And as you exhale, you don't notice it. It's not as easy to sense because it's warmed up now. And so notice that, breathing in and out, the sensation of that. Notice how when you take a breath, your chest expands. Your belly can expand as well if you're breathing deeply. And let yourself just settle into your chair. Let your chair do its job of holding you up so that you don't have to be responsible for keeping yourself up. And let yourself just sink in. Feel it on your back. Feel it on your legs. In fact, rub your feet on the floor, your toes, wiggle your toes. Let yourself come back from all those directions that you've sent yourself off to today, and give yourself a moment to just be with you. And then I'd like to invite you to notice that even though there may not be women with you in the room that you're in, that right now we're in the presence of women, and that as women we can connect and support each other just by our knowledge, knowing that we're in a virtual room together. And so just imagine now that you're connected with all the other women who are watching this video and who will watch the video, and allow yourself to feel that connection, feel the warmth that that creates in your body. And take a nice deep breath and let yourself rest even more into your chair. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful guest, Rosalie Norem. Thank you, Rosalie, for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, I could say, in fact, I pulled this up because if we looked at a list of your, everything that you've done, it is really quite an impressive list. You have, so I'm going to invite people to look at the Front Royal Women's Resource Center website or their Facebook page to get all the details of Rosalie's amazing credentials. But I'd like to say that one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you to talk again is because I did hear you at that breakfast so long ago, and what you had to say and share really moved me in such a deep way and made me feel, it really opened my eyes to women and what we're, your discussion is the feminization of women, of courage.
Right.
And it's really about women and courage.
Yes.
And as we were talking about before we set this up, we tend to think of courage, we tend to think of men. But you have something else to say about it, don't you?
Well, I do, and I've told this story that day, and I'll tell it again next week, but it really is the context from which all of this interest of mine grew. I think all of us have these moments, sort of aha moments, when something really hits us. And shortly after 9/11, which we all know what we were doing at that point, but I was driving in the car and listening to the Senate hearings on the debate about going into Iraq. And one of the senators was very disgruntled about the fact that there wasn't an immediate unanimous vote to go in and basically destroy Iraq. Yeah. And the comment he made was, what we're seeing on the floor of the Senate is the feminization of courage. And the implication was clear that that meant lack of courage. And at the moment, I wish I had stopped the car, written down who it was, the date and time, but I didn't. I just kept going. And I got home and I started thinking about that and started thinking about all the women I have known around the world and had the opportunity to work with, and the courage that they show every day in their lives to make the world a better place for them, their families and their communities. And it just really bothered me, and it's continued to sort of percolate around up back there. And now what I find is every day, if you look in the paper, you will or watch the news, you will find examples of women being courageous. I think we're sometimes courageous. I'm not going to say courage is different for women, but I think maybe the way it plays out is somewhat different, because we know that with economic development, with education for women, if there's an improvement, they invest that back into their families, into their communities. And I think that's where we really see women's courage being demonstrated, is what can we do about the situation that we see in our community. One of the definitions I see, one of the things I see a lot in looking at definitions of courage is recognizing something's not right and we need to do something about that. And I think I said earlier, women are pretty good at that.
I thought that was great.
I think we have,
Yes,
I think we have
do.
a lot of practice at that.
Yes.
You know, whether it's in our household or in our town or in our country, when we say things have to be changed. And I think a lot of what we should recognize as women's courage is taking action in those situations, even at great risk.
Yes. And we see that now. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about social media, is that
Yes.
people can post what they're doing, these really courageous acts. You were mentioning this woman in, where was it, somewhere in the Middle East who...
A couple of weeks ago I saw, and frankly I don't remember if it was in the paper or it was on the internet, this young woman, I think it was in Dubai, and she simply took a picture of herself without the hijab and posted it on Facebook. And she got a lot of really negative and seriously threatening reaction to that. And she said she did know what she was doing, but just felt like it was important to say, it's okay for me to show who I am. And you know, that might not seem like a big thing, but to me that was a very courageous thing. This was a young girl, probably 18, 19 years old, and she just said to herself, I'm going to do this. I know it's a risk, but I think it's important.
And she could bring death.
She could in that particular situation. Yeah. It could have been life-threatening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'm trying to do in thinking about next week, again, it's gotten me thinking more about it, is to look at what makes up courage for women, what examples do we see of it, and frankly, I think we also need to be able to recognize it within ourselves. And I think women are often not very good at recognizing our strengths in many areas. And I would bet that everybody here and everybody watching, if you stop and think about it, you'd find courage within yourself, and you could find examples of when you've used that courage to better either your situation or somebody else's.
Well, I remember you talking about how courageous it is for a woman to get up every day and make sure her children are fed, make sure
Exactly.
the house, I mean, it does, it takes tremendous courage
Absolutely.
to do that.
You know, how many days have you wanted to just stay in bed and let somebody else take care of it, but you don't because nobody else is going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's courage. I think that's a real strength that we have, and that we need to recognize that.
Right.
So one of the things I want to talk about next week is ways that we can recognize and enhance courage within ourselves and see it among others in our community.
Right. And I think the Women's Resource Center does a wonderful job. Our mission is to empower women to change their world.
Exactly. I think that's our whole intent, and it really is about courage. You know, if you think about starting the Women's Resource Center all those years ago, we're going into our 20th year in 2018, and it took courage to recognize that this was a need in this community.
Yes.
And to say, if we work together, we can do something about this. And now look at what we've done about it. How many women we've supported in their own courageous activities over the years.
With the Dare to Dream
With the Dare to Dream grant. For a lot of the women who make that application, it takes a lot of courage even to just fill out that application and to say, I'm worth going after this for.
Right.
And we've seen so many examples of that. I've had the opportunity to be on that committee for a number of years, and we're just always blown away with applicants who come in and tell us their stories and the courage that they really have to say, I want to make something change. I want things to be better.
Yes.
And you know, that I think is an underpinning of most courageous acts. We want to make something better.
It's really true. It's a big motivator.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So it's a big topic, and I don't claim to have hold of all of it. I've been looking at how people define courage, and what I've found is that this is a debate that's been going on way back to some of the ancient Chinese philosophers, and probably before that, just wasn't any way of recording it. And so that's been an interesting mental exercise for me in the last few days, looking at, you know, what does this mean? I actually heard this quote on TV that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something else is more important than fear. And of course I went to Wikipedia to see who said that, and found there that it was attributed to the author of The Princess Bride, and I thought, oh, I don't think so. So, I mean, I don't even know who that person is, and it could be, but I actually found at much earlier sources of that, like
Yes.
Confucius.
There you go.
So this has been something that human beings have looked at for a long time. However, one of the things I also found is even today, most of the definitions focus on men of courage and not very much about women of courage. And I think the implication of that is that women are not courageous, and we know that's not true.
It's really not true.
We know that's not true.
But you're absolutely right that we hold that kind of image in our minds. And, you know, the real classic old example is that, you know, the men go off to war and they find glory in war.
And, you know, when the men went off hunting the big beasts and the women stayed home, they had to have a lot of courage. They had to keep those fires burning, and they had to keep those kids fed. They might not see their husbands for months. That took a lot of courage too, but nobody ever wrote anything about that.
No, they didn't.
You know.
And you know what you said at that breakfast that really stayed with me was that they might have gone off to war, but there would have been nothing to come back to if it weren't for the women holding the structure of society together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you talk about defending culture, there's a very active, aggressive way to defend culture, but there's also a very day-to-day, hard work way to defend culture.
Yes.
And women do most of that work. I'm not saying that men never do that, because I've had certainly a lot of experiences in my life when men were doing that as well. But I think we really need to look at giving ourselves credit.
Yes. But we notice that.
We notice that. That's
So,
right. That's
yes.
right. And history notices that.
Yes. Well, and so I had some neighbors, and they were in their 80s. And the wife used to say that I, sent my husband to work and I kept the home. And when he retired, he made me breakfast every morning.
Mm-hmm.
So from the day he retired, he made me breakfast every morning. And I thought, nobody's really giving her kudos for making breakfast for how many years?
Exactly.
But now that her husband's making breakfast,
we all have to
sweet?
sit up and notice that.
Yes.
Exactly. That's a good example.
Yeah. So there are these roles that are where we, as women, we tend to just think that what we're doing that really is takes courage. It's just what we do. We just do it. But it's sort of these things that are not connected to the more fabric, the weaving of society that tends to be in the men, that what gets noticed and discussed.
Yes. And, quite frankly, and we've just seen an example of this recently, the woman who really did all the math to put John Glenn in space.
Yeah.
Did you read about that in the paper? She was not allowed to present any of her findings at professional conferences when she was doing that work. And just now is it recognized that she was really one of the people that made that possible.
Wow.
Everybody knows who he is, and I don't take anything away from what he did, but nobody's ever heard of her.
No, and I actually think that on our Facebook page there's a link to an
article
on
yeah,
Mighty Girl,
I saw that, and that was great.
Because I had not heard of it either. Who knew
no,
that there were these women?
Neither had I. Neither had I.
And you kind of go, women physicists in the space, space race. It was really shocking.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, they were really kept under wraps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The daughter of one of my good friends is an astrophysicist, and she has discovered water on asteroids, which means that there is a source of water that might make space travel possible.
Wow, that is stunning.
I don't think very many people know that.
No, I did not.
A few people in her close professional circle know, but
and you would think something like that would be pasted all over the news. That's a really big news.
Yes, it is, but I've not seen it anywhere in the news.
No, I haven't either.
So I guess I just urge all of you, just look around and be aware of what you see women doing that takes a lot of courage.
Right. How did you get involved in this? I mean, I know you have this story, but even before you had that experience driving.
Well, I started, I was on a university faculty, and I started working a lot with international students, primarily graduate students from all over the world. And a lot of them were women, and I began to be aware of really what it took for many of them to get to that situation of just being a graduate student, which I think in this country, most young women, if they want to go to graduate school and they have the capability, they assume they will be able to find a way to have that opportunity. But many of these women, young women, had, first of all, their families had sacrificed a great deal. They had sacrificed a great deal. In some instances, several instances, they had sacrificed really all ties with their families because it was not thought of something that they should do. Right. And again, many cases, the motivation was they saw things going on that they wanted to have the capability to work to change. Mm-hmm. And I know over time that many of them have been able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what first really started me thinking about it. And then from that, I began to work with some of them in projects in an international context, and that became my career.
Wow.
So it's you know, we are influenced by the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Right.
I think that's always true.
Yeah. And you know, we think in some ways that there are a lot of difficulties for women in the United States, but women around the world are just the idea that just posting a picture of yourself could
be life-threatening.
Or when you know, in many countries in the world, when a woman is raped or when they have physical problems, they're shunned, not by the family. Like the men, it's okay. They're just being men. But the women pay the price. Women
pay the price. It's still true in a number of countries that if a woman is raped, her family has, you've heard of honor killings. Mm-hmm. Her family is honor bound to kill her because she has been violated and is held responsible for that. And I always try to be careful about making judgments about other cultures, but I think there are things that are just against humanity, and that's one of the things that I include in that. Sorry, I had to smile at that.
That was cute.
Yeah, off-screen adjustment. Nobody's.
I couldn't touch.
We do take care of one another, don't
we? Okay.
That was awesome.
A little wardrobe malfunction there.
I didn't do that quite so eloquently. My bad. We need a new wardrobe woman.
Our ratings are going up now.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, and you know, there are some, even in our culture, there are certain things that are, that women pay a much greater price for. And it's men, it's like they're just being boys, and women pay the higher price here for the consequences of that.
Instead of just saying it might be time that they grew up.
Yes.
You know, it's that seems to me something that shouldn't be an excuse after you're an adult, is just being boys. But you know, we have those stereotypes, and I think we have stereotypes of the girls as well. Mm-hmm. And one of them is that we have a lot of courage.
Yeah.
It's not a stereotype that we've held, I think.
So I think it's especially important, you know, the work that you're doing to help people understand that courage is not just getting your sword and heading out to war.
You know, there's physical courage, and that's an important thing, and I think that's what we've focused on. But there's also a moral courage that I think is so important. And probably other definitions that one could find as well. But I think that's, and I certainly don't believe that women don't have physical courage, because they do, but it's usually not demonstrated in an aggressive manner.
Yeah.
Maybe in a defensive manner, but anyway, I shouldn't generalize about that, but I will.
Okay. Well, it's about time to start wrapping it up. But
Okay.
I know that you will be here next
week.
Wednesday. It starts at 11:30. The doors open at 11:30. You can come in and get your lunch. You can pick up lunch or bring your lunch with you. There's all kinds of options here. And you'll be speaking, I think, about noon. The actual talk starts.
Okay, whenever they tell me.
And I know that you have, this is a much more casual discussion tonight,
Yes.
but you have a more formal talk that you'll be giving. And I know it's going to be a very worthwhile time to be
Thank
here.
you.
So,
Well,
yes.
thank you for having me here this evening. This is fun to start off this new thing here. I think it has great potential.
Thank you. And I appreciate very much you coming and being our first. In fact, I think it's really appropriate talking about courage in women. It took courage to do this, didn't it? And I'd like to thank our wonderful camera person,
Yes.
Jen Avery. Of
She should turn it around
Jenspiration.
and show herself.
Yeah, come on over
Come
here
on.
and say hi.
Yay, it's
And I think with that, we shall, are there any other announcements that we should make? No? Okay. Well, we'd like to thank the audience for being here as well. Thank you very much. And just a reminder that we'll be here on the third Thursday. And actually, our guest next in February will be Norma Jean Shaw. And she'll be talking about her online news organization that she's been putting together called the Royal Examiner. So we'll be very happy to have her as well. So
That'll be
thank you
great.
so much.
You're welcome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
always a pleasure.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.